Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Please welcome Sheila Betty, who is the counsel to the mayor, Brandon Johnson, City of Chicago.
Good afternoon, everyone. It is my honor to represent the mayor before this incredibly important forum during this historic moment in our country's history, where those who are in positions of power in Washington, D.C. are obscuring truth and are governing through racist rhetoric. As a longtime civil rights lawyer, it has been my honor to serve Mayor Brandon Johnson's administration, and his leadership has really created a national model for responding to the crisis that the federal government has imposed on our local communities. I'm going to start today by summarizing some of the executive orders that Mayor Johnson has signed in response to threats from the federal government. I'm also going to describe the concrete harms that the federal government has imposed on Chicago's communities. And I'll end with a reflection on the raid that happened in the South Shore community that garnered a lot of media attention. And I'm going to start with some important context. As I know you all know, Chicago is a sanctuary city. Chicago has been a sanctuary city thanks to the leadership and legacy of Mayor Harold Washington. And under Mayor Brandon Johnson, Chicago will remain a sanctuary city by policy, by practice, and as enforced by the power that Mayor Brandon Johnson has through the executive of this city. The through line of Mayor Brandon Johnson's executive orders is very simple. Chicago is not going to govern by fear, and it will not abandon its residents when the federal government is targeting us for social media content, sowing fear, division, creating violence, and harming the city's microeconomies. In response to the threats that Donald Trump was making, and at the point that the mayor began to issue these executive orders, the threats to our communities were speculative. They became very real. But the first executive order that the mayor signed was the Protecting Chicago initiative. And that was to ensure that city departments are coordinated and prepared when federal actions threatened our residents' safety and the ability of the city to function. When aggressive immigration enforcement escalates, the damage radiates outwards. People are not calling 911, parents are not sending their children to schools, people aren't showing up to work. The damage that the intense immigration enforcement had in our communities touched every single corner of this city. And this erosion of trust, this harm to families, this harm to our local economies didn't make our city safer. What it did was erode trust and create terror and fear. But the mayor responded with an order that was focused on maintaining constitutional guardrails, ensuring that all of the city agencies acted lawfully and did what they could to prevent chaos when federal actions intended to destabilize our neighborhoods. The other thing this executive order did was to make clear that the Chicago Police Department would remain under the control of Mayor Brandon Johnson and the city of Chicago, and reaffirm the city's commitment to remaining a sanctuary city. At the point that this executive order was signed, we were watching what was happening in Washington, D.C., where the federal government took over the local police department there. Now, the local government had different legal authority to do so in D.C., but we were concerned about the government overreaching and trying to assert control over the police department here. So what the mayor did is proactively sign an executive order, making clear that our local police department would remain under local control. The other thing that this order did was require that Chicago Police Department officers wear uniforms so that residents could clearly identify a Chicago Police Department officer as opposed to a federal law enforcement officer who, as we now know, were showing up in plain clothes, often without any insignia, marking them as law enforcement. Another executive order that the mayor signed made clear that city-owned property would not be used to facilitate immigration raids. And this matters because government participation in these federal actions, even passive participation, confers legitimacy to what the federal government was doing. And Mayor Johnson drew a firm line. Chicago would not lend its infrastructure to terrorize our residents. And that executive order then created a really echo effect around the country. The County of Los Angeles just issued the exact same executive order. The executive order was then implemented in Cook County, in Evanston, and that executive order is referred to often as the ice-free zones order. And one of the reasons why that order was essential is because what we saw was that that the federal government was staging out of CPD parking lots, outside of schools, in our parks, trying to use our city infrastructure to terrorize our residents. And the mayor's response to that was to assert control over our property to ensure that it could not be used for civil immigration enforcement. Recently, the mayor has also issued executive orders focused on fiscal responsibility and transparency. These include tightening police overtime controls, launching operational reviews, and prohibiting the sale of city-held medical debt. These kinds of protections for working families are incredibly important in the face of federal budget cuts. The budget cuts, and I'll talk about these a little bit later, are really attacking our social safety net and creating even more pressure to try to balance budgets on the backs of working people. And what the mayor has said is, despite pressure from the federal government, that will not happen in the city of Chicago. These executive orders, of course, did not arise in a vacuum. They were in response to the sustained harm created by the federal government that we saw here in Chicago, that we're seeing around the country. Most recently, of course, what we're seeing, the horrors we're seeing out of Minneapolis. What we saw during Operation Midway Blitz was that immigration enforcement was being used as a tactic of intimidation, and it was designed to send messages to entire communities. Many of you, I'm sure, saw clips on social media or on the news. These federal agents were quite literally traveling with their own camera crews to capture the terror and the fear of families being ripped apart. That wasn't for a legitimate law enforcement purpose. That was to create content. And it just violated the very essence of what the city of Chicago stands for, which is the fact that we are a sanctuary city. Each one of these raids, of course, individuals were detained, but entire families were destabilized, witnesses were silenced, and public safety across the city was undermined as a result of what the federal government did. And this is why the city's sanctuary city status matters so much. Because we are a sanctuary city, our local police department don't act as federal immigration agents. City services are not conditioned on immigration status, and residents can interact with our local government without fear of deportation. These are critically important protections that ensure that our city can function. And the federal government has targeted the city of Chicago and has targeted all sanctuary cities, trying to coerce the city to abandon its sanctuary city policies in response to threats from the federal government. And Mayor Johnson has been unequivocal. Chicago is going to defend its sanctuary city status. Chicago is going to do what it can within the bounds of the law to ensure that we remain a sanctuary city and that we protect citizens to the fullest extent that we can from these kinds of federal overreach. The federal government has attempted to try to change cities across the country's policies and to coerce compliance by threatening funding, by misusing the executive power, and by clear violations of constitutional limits. And because of that, the city of Chicago has repeatedly had to defend itself against the federal government in court, and also has filed numerous actions against the federal government to stop the deployment of the National Guard. And the most recent lawsuit takes on the tactics that the feds used when they were here, including racial profiling, including the use of the city property during enforcement actions. We've seen the federal government weaponize funding to try to get its way, to try to get the city of Chicago to abandon its policies. And that has been threatening or freezing billions of dollars tied to transit, housing, childcare, violence prevention, and other social services. And these cuts are not abstract. They delay infrastructure projects, they weaken our efforts at violence interruption, and they strain childcare systems and mental health services. And of course, every part of the city isn't feeling the threat of these cuts in the same way. These cuts disproportionately land in Black and brown neighborhoods that are already carrying the weight of historic divestment. And that's one of the reasons why the mayor has been fighting for a budget that ensures that we can continue investments that create public safety and provide necessary mental health services. And that is despite the pressure that the federal government is putting and will continue to put on the social safety net. And finally, we are witnessing a coordinated federal campaign to eradicate anything labeled DEI. But when they say DEI, what they're really talking about is civil rights enforcement, language access, fair housing, inclusive education. And the mayor has made clear that equity is not extremism. These types of efforts, civil rights enforcement, language access, it's how a multiracial democracy governs. It's how a multiracial democracy must govern. But in the view of the federal government, all of those efforts are being lumped as illegal DEI. And the city of Chicago is currently fighting in litigation, protecting the city's ability to govern as a multiracial democracy. So before I close, I want to spend a few minutes talking about what happened in South Shore. And I know so many of you saw what happened, but it's worth lifting it up again. In the early morning hours, federal agents raided an apartment building at 7500 South Shore Drive. Families were pulled from their homes. People were restrained. Parents were restrained in front of their children. Residents were treated as suspects first, human beings later. We came to find out that the vast majority of individuals who were targeted in that raid had no criminal record whatsoever. Now the state is investigating whether the landlord of that apartment, the property manager, actually tipped off the federal agents in an effort to try to get the building evacuated. The harm that those residents endured did not end when the federal agents left. Families were destabilized, residents were displaced, and an entire community was left with trauma. And also it sent the message across the country, but particularly here in Chicago, that anyone could be next, that anyone could be subject to a federal helicopter landing on the roof of your apartment building and pulling you out of your home in the middle of the night. And the horror and the trauma that our communities faced as a result of that is really impossible to calculate. What happened in South Shore demonstrates that when federal power is exercised without any kind of accountability, and when federal power is exercised to create TikToks instead of to protect people, local governments are left to absorb the fallout. The other thing that's important about what happened in South Shore is that it demonstrates the interconnectedness of the harm that the federal government is imposing on the city of Chicago. You know, the mayor often recounts that during that raid, the federal government put Black families in one van, immigrants in another. The fate of our communities has never been more intertwined. And this story is important to remember and to continually recount, because our communities are only going to survive this federal onslaught if we recognize our interconnectedness and recognize that what happens to one of us happens to all of us. In response to this raid, Mayor Johnson made clear that the city of Chicago was not going to be a passive participant in this kind of harm. And when the bank that owned the property moved to evict all of the residents who were left behind, all of whom were Black Chicagoans, the mayor mobilized the full force of government to offer residents with housing resources, public benefits, and case management. This was a building that had fallen into disrepair long before the federal government had attacked it. And it was and the individuals who were left behind both with the trauma of this federal attack and also with the risk of ending up homeless as a result of the bank that owned the building. And the mayor stepped in to ensure that they would get the resources they need. So Mayor Johnson has demonstrated time and time again that he's not going to cower in the face of these threats from President Trump. Of course, the attacks from the federal government are not over. We can expect more unlawful immigration raids, more retaliatory funding threats, more efforts to undermine federal civil rights and local democracy. And we can also expect that the mayor will respond in kind, using the full extent of his executive power to respond. You know, this pressure from Washington, D.C. is inevitable, but submission to the pressure is not. And under Mayor Johnson's leadership, Chicago is going to protect its people, Chicago will protect its autonomy, and Chicago will not be bullied out of its values. I'm going to end there, and I'd welcome the chance to answer any questions that you have.
Thank you. Thank you so much for your testimony. At this portion of the agenda, we're going to open it up to our commissioners for questions.
Peace and blessings. First, want to commend you and thank you for the leadership of your administration and everything the mayor has done to be unequivocal about not only the ordinance, but the larger set of principles and values and the ethics and the ability to be, again, unwavering in the declaration that not only will we not submit or cower to this, but we will not let our communities be pitted against one another. So for all of that, thank you. It means a tremendous amount to those of us who've been trying to fight that fight for many, many years, to have an administration that genuinely believes and is invested in it. With that said, I also want to especially call out among the several of us, you know, we're at the center at the, you know, at the building on 75th and have dealt with the types of issues that have also led to those type of vulnerabilities. So I'm glad that in your testimony, for the record, you also cited that it was a building in disrepair. It was a building that also had fallen into a cycle of violence itself that contributes, that type of poverty and abandonment in those types of properties can further make us vulnerable to being pitted against one another. Because there were residents that said, why did it take a federal raid to precipitate intervention from a building that had been troubled for many, many years? So we appreciate the fact that you are also lifting up the work that a lot of communities are doing alongside our attempt to protect our freedoms, which is basic equity, development, housing, and why they're all interwoven with one another. So thank you for that. The one very specific question I also would love to hear your response to, for the record, is something we heard in our last testimony. We'd love to get some really clear answers from you on this. We have been hearing, in spite of the mayor's very strong declarations, that there are moments of collusion between CPD and ICE agents. We don't know if that is individual CPD officers or whether ICE has been able to be effective in tapping database systems connected to CPD. But very specifically, in our last testimony, we heard from someone, for instance, who had an individual who was stopped by CPD for a very minor kind of alcohol on the breath. I think it was a 0.8 on the person was let go. Before that could even hit court, the individual went home. The next morning, ICE agents were in front of his house, ostensibly picking him up on a DUI. The only way the person providing the testimony surmised they could have gotten that information was from a CPD officer or CPD database. So can you speak very honestly and candidly to what you are confronting with this, so that those of us who are out in the field that want to work in a spirit of alignment with the administration can continue to do so?
Thank you. Thank you for those comments, and I will certainly do my best. And I'll just spend a moment reflecting on South Shore and the housing conditions, which, you know, I think you're getting at, the conditions that people lived in was a form of violence. There's no question about that. And we are looking at initiatives to try to be responsive to mass evictions throughout the city. And part of that is a result of some of the learnings of South Shore, and kind of recognizing that these conditions have persisted throughout the city before we had to confront these threats from the Trump administration, and that they need to be addressed. So more coming there. So on the issue of CPD and the Welcoming City Ordinance and involvement in information sharing with the federal government. You asked for a clear answer, and I wish I could give you a clear answer. What I will say is that the information sharing piece of this is very complicated. So individual CPD officers cannot participate in civil immigration enforcement. CPD regularly in the work that it does in terms of enforcing local and federal law, collaborate with federal law enforcement. Right? Collaborate with FBI agents, collaborate with ATF agents, that collaboration happens. And that requires the sharing of some informational databases. So what might end up happening, and this is just purely speculative, is that information about CPD's arrest databases is accessible to the FBI. The FBI could then share some of that information. This is a significant concern that so many of our community partners have brought up repeatedly. And there was an incident that happened in the South Loop on June 4th that resulted in the mayor's office doing a review of CPD's engagement with federal immigration enforcement. And one of the recommendations to come out of that review is that the Civilian Office of Police Accountability have jurisdiction over complaints of violations of the Welcoming City Ordinance. What that means is that in the incident that you just described, or in any other incident where a member of the public believes that police officers, CPD officers, have violated the Welcoming City Ordinance, they could file a complaint with COPA, as it's called. That is an ordinance that is being put forward by members of City Council. There will be a hearing on it on January 27th. It is a proposal that the mayor is in full support of. So we hope that will be able to provide some fixes and some accountability here. And the other thing I'll share is that we are in constant communication about these incidents, and that when there is an incident where there's civil immigration enforcement, we've got a protocol in the mayor's office where one of us, sometimes it was myself, sometimes it was members of our immigrant and migrant rights team, deployed to the scene to capture some of this information. So I apologize that the answer wasn't clear, but I hope that one of the takeaways is that we've heard this issue being raised, we're concerned about it, we want it to be addressed with the kind of transparency that our residents deserve.
And do you have data though? Do you keep data for how many times it's happening? So for instance, in this case, if ICE is deploying CPD data to justify a raid or an arrest, are you in the city aware or tracking how many times that is happening? I would imagine at some point there has to be an entry that says we deployed data that we either got from CBD or that CBD, like you said, shared with the FBI. Or I don't know why a DUI, for instance, though, would have been shared with a federal law enforcement database. I mean, it seems like a very mundane thing. So are you tracking those numbers? Are there ways in which we can then help hold folks accountable by working with the city to actually get that data?
So what I know is that I think it was in 2017 or 2018, the Office of Inspector General did a report on the city's gang database. And what the Inspector General was able to conclude is how many times various federal entities accessed CPD's data collection apparatus, which is called CLEAR. So what you're asking, can we determine when federal authorities have accessed CLEAR? The answer is the Inspector General was able to do it in the past. So that's, we are not, there's not a protocol that I'm aware of where we're doing that regularly now, but that's, you've given me something to think about.
Um, Hi, Sheila. I'm Rick Tulsky. I'm wondering when a CPD officer is on the street in a situation and watches firsthand an ICE or Border Patrol agent act in a clearly illegal way, either smashing the windows out of a car without a warrant or some other assault. What do they do in that situation? Do they make an arrest and how is it handled?
So Superintendent Snelling has been very clear that as of now and as of when Operation Midway Blitz was in sort of full force, that CPD officers would not intervene with federal law enforcement. And so that is the position that the superintendent has taken. It's my understanding that that is the direction that CPD officers have been given. Since then, we have seen superintendents in other jurisdictions make clear that their officers would have an obligation to intervene under the circumstances that you just described. So, I can tell you what the superintendent has said. I can also tell you that we are very aware of superintendents in other jurisdictions that have taken a different interpretation, and that those conversations are ongoing.
Has the mayor taken a position?
I'm not sure that the mayor has taken a position. What I can tell you on that particular issue, what I can tell you is that the mayor has asked his staff to come to him with all lawful proposals for how across the enterprise, the city of Chicago can protect its residents. And I can tell you that that is on the list.
Thank you, Council, for being here. We appreciate your time. We know you have lots to do. And I want to echo Rami's thanks for many other things as well. And I do want to ask a couple of hard questions. So I want to go back to the South Shore raid. We heard direct testimony this morning about how there were no resources offered to the residents of the South Shore building who were displaced. So I'm wondering if you would be able to provide for our record here the numbers of people in that building who were able to access city resources. So if you sent resources, how many people were rehoused because of the city resources? How many people were able to access rental money of some kind? How many people were given help with the relocating? We would like to have those hard numbers because it directly goes against what direct testimony we were given this morning. And then the other question about the South Shore raid is, has the city filed any lawsuits against federal agents for using city-owned property? Because we know at South Shore, they were in the school parking lot, so city-owned property, to conduct that raid. So have there been any lawsuits brought against federal agents for violating what is private property and city-owned property? Or, I think there are a lot of people that we hear from that are saying, it's just word, like an executive order is just words unless there are direct and concrete consequences for violating that thing.
Thank you for those questions. On the issue of South Shore, I'll say that I personally spent several days with some of the residents from South Shore attempting to connect people with resources. And also, just to state plainly, the resources that the city is able to make available are insufficient for the needs that people had in that building. And part of that is because the city's social service infrastructure has been underfunded, and that I, personally, and also as a representative of the city, wish we could have done so much more. So I will certainly provide you the information about who we were able to get connected with resources through the Department of Family and Support Services, as well as through some of our community-based partners. So we'll get you that information. But I do want to clarify that in me bringing up the mayor's directive that we work to try to provide resources, I don't mean to suggest we were able to solve the problem that those residents were enduring. The question about lawsuits related to the ice-free zones executive order, the answer to that question is yes. Most recently, I think it was about 2 weeks ago, the city and the state of Illinois filed a lawsuit in federal court alleging that the federal government's use of the city of Chicago property violates the 10th Amendment of the US Constitution. And makes some very specific allegations about how the federal government was essentially co-opting the use of city property. And the executive order was used in that lawsuit to emphasize the explicit prohibition and the consistent violations of those prohibitions.
My question is, given the number of ICE actions in this city that the mayor has tried to prevent with the executive order, what kind of systemic or structural allocation of resources and staff are available for those of us who are in the faith sector that we can call and help people? The one from South Shore today was just incredibly disappointing because you have people already on the margins living in a building that was very much like the building that Dr. King came to Chicago, a slum landlord, and nothing had been done prior to the ICE raids. And that kind of worries me. And so I'm just wondering how we can work with the city to help give you ideas on those properties that should be condemned, pretty much like Dr. King did with the hostile then mayor of the city, Richard J. Daley. Just can't, when that lady testified, we couldn't move to the rest of the testimony because it was just so frustrating that we all watched it on television and there's been little or no completion for her and 39 others. I think it's 40 people.
Yeah.
And so we need, I know Sierra-based Chamberlain and Live Free asked some time ago for a faith-based office with the city. I think that we need to, and you may be able to recommend, we need that now. As these ICE raids escalate, we can no longer call 15 different agents of the city. We need to have a point of reference so that we can help you help our people. Would you take that back, or do you think that makes sense?
Yes to both. I will take it back, and I do think it makes sense. And we have been working to try to streamline that. We are in such close collaboration and communication with so many of our community partners. And then the other thing I'll lift up is that the mayor's office released a 5-year plan to try to address homelessness throughout the city of Chicago. And part of that plan has to be addressing buildings like the ones at South Shore and so many others. So if any commissioners are interested in a meeting with our chief homelessness officer, specifically around redressing some of the conditions that could lead to homelessness, I know that there would be a lot of interest in that. The plan is currently been released for public comment, so it's not finalized. So this would be an opportunity where we could take some of these recommendations, Reverend, and ensure that it is in the plan. And I'd be happy to help facilitate that.
Final question.
Thank you. Thank you for your transparency and your conversation around the city's effort. I want to go back to the data gathering. Rami, I think, raised a very important question. We know that in the city of Chicago, there are a number of parking lots that are subcontracted through the city. Because we are in the age of technology, A lot of the parking lots now are using Q cards, yeah, QR codes, okay? Proactively, what is the city doing to ensure that anyone that is going into a parking garage, that QR code is not being used as a surveillance tactic?
That's an excellent question. And I can say I don't have the answer, but I can look into that and I'm happy to report back to the commission.
Madam Chair, can we read anything into the record? Question? Apology?
Yes.
Thank you.
Final question.
No, even if there's not time to answer now, I think I just wanted to say, as tough as it is to have to sit and say, I don't know, or we're not sure, it falls short in some ways. We've heard testimony and heard documentation and verification of the ways in which it's a good thing to be in a city that is taking the actions that are being taken here, as opposed to a city that is very, very complicit in terms of the outcomes for people. So I wanted to thank you for your time and thank the administration and the mayor. One thing I wanted to note is that in that 5-year plan, I don't know if there's any mention of any of the I don't even want to say UN, international human rights law that supersedes civil rights law that can be made applicable locally. Because you can do that, the mayor can do that.
Absolutely.
Really, really, really important in these situations. And specifically, we know that it'll be 20 years ago in 2029, when the city of Chicago took the lead in helping enact a resolution on the rights of the child. I'm just thinking about that because of what we keep hearing over and over and over and over again, including with the South Shore example of the children being zip tied, the children having to watch what is happening to the adults around them, their teachers or whomever, the children who come home and their parents are gone. And the generational impact that's going to have. So wondering about just applying those principles right now. Chicago has had some measure of success with small piece of partial reparations and so forth in applying human rights law, irrespective of federal level or anyone else who disregards it. And then if the World Council of Mayors can be a part of this conversation and collective to support, I think that would be critical as well. So thank you, Madam Chair, and my commissioner colleagues as well.
Thank you so much for joining us today. Please give her a round of applause.
Thank you, and I'll just say briefly, I appreciate all of the questions and the ideas to take back to the mayor's office. I know you all know the mayor, comes from community organizing and appreciates the pressure and the questions so that we can be more responsive to the needs of our community. So thank you all for your service and what you're doing. It was an honor to appear before you. Thank you.
We will continue and transition to the next testimony. Next, we call up Pastor Matt DiMatteo. He's with New Life Community Church, CEO of New Life Centers of the Chicagoland.
Afternoon, everybody.
Give me a second, I'll put this on you, okay?
Perfect. Yeah. No, it's all through, sure.
No, that's
Too much? That's good. Perfect.
Or we just sit this on the house. And as you project, this will pick you up just fine.
I appreciate it.
Okay.
Good to go? Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks so much for having me. My name is Matt DiMatteo, and I have lived and served in the Little Village community for 25 years with my wife and 3 kids. I'm a pastor with New Life Community Church, a multi-site church that has served Chicago for 40 years. And also, I serve as the CEO of New Life Centers of Chicagoland, a faith-driven nonprofit working with youth and families across Chicago. For more than 20 years, New Life Centers has been deeply embedded in Chicago's neighborhoods. Our team mentors 600 young people ages 12 to 24, supports 200 kindergarten to 8th grade students in after-school programs, and engages 2,500 youth through year-round sports. We respond to every shooting in Little Village, Pilsen, and Brighton Park, working daily to interrupt violence and build peace. Through community care, we feed 10,000 neighbors per month, support local entrepreneurs, and welcome families at our Community Welcome Center. Over the last 2 years, through our New Vecinos initiative, we have placed 6,000 new arrival families into apartments. We've hosted 5,500 individuals in our family shelters. We've welcomed 5,000 people at the landing zone and distributed more than 1 million items through our warehouse. Our work is simple: faith in action. We walk life on life with our neighbors. We offer hope, healing, community, and opportunity. It's been the greatest joy of my life to be able to serve alongside churches, partners, and government agencies and civic leaders who care deeply about our communities. In my 25 years of serving in Chicago, 2025 has been the hardest year I have ever experienced, and the last 6 months have been the most difficult of those 25 years. Operation Midway Blitz, which began on September 6th, has wreaked havoc across Chicagoland. More than 4,500 plus people have been taken, the majority in these last 4 months. And ICE operations have created chaos, ripping families apart and instilling deep fear across entire neighborhoods. This is not only an immigration issue. It is an economic issue, a spiritual issue, an education issue, and a medical issue affecting businesses, churches, schools, and clinics across our city. And the narrative that ICE is removing dangerous criminals is simply not true. According to an NPR investigation of the over 600 people set to be released a few months ago, less than 3% of those arrested in Chicago had a criminal record. In the last 6 months alone, I have personally witnessed ICE arrest U.S. citizens, my staff members, grab random neighbors off of the street, deploy tear gas on my staff. I myself have been hit with pepper balls, arrest members of my team also who are U.S. citizens. They've caused accidents, they've shot neighbors, and they've spread a level of fear that is traumatizing entire communities. I live here, I raise my family here in Little Village, I worship, I work here, and what I've seen is heartbreaking. I'm gonna zoom in on a specific day in the last few months, on November 8th. On November 8th, I was eating breakfast when my staff called me to report that ICE activity was rampant in the neighborhood. They had begun at 26th and Kedzie and were speeding erratically through the community. I got into our New Life van to check on neighbors. At 11:09 a.m., I arrived at the corner of 26th and Pulaski and witnessed 10 ICE vehicles stopped in the middle of the street, agents exiting with automatic rifles drawn, and I began filming. 2 flashbangs detonated, and I saw Gregory Bovino holding a gas grenade with the pin pulled, ready to throw. Moments later, the caravan sped west down 26th Street. At 11:18, I turned into the Sam's Club parking lot and immediately saw a family in distress, clearly pepper sprayed or tear gassed. I ran to them. It was a young couple, their 1-year-old daughter, and a 16-year-old sister. They could barely see. We flushed their eyes, and I drove the father, who could not see well and was in a panic attack, in the New Life van. His wife drove their car with the baby and the sister behind me, and we brought them to Lawndale Christian Health Center for treatment. Later, I received the video of what happened. The family was simply shopping on a Saturday afternoon, trying to get groceries, when they were confronted with this caravan of ICE agents. They weren't protesting, they weren't chasing vehicles, they were simply shopping. And I don't know if anybody here has seen any of these raids, but especially when you have the Black Hawk helicopter overhead, 200 feet above you where you can see the pilot, these agents speeding past, and this young family is met with the helicopter overhead, ICE agents speeding past. And then as they decided to leave because they didn't want to deal with whatever chaos was happening in the parking lot, they were pulling away, and an ICE agent reached out of his vehicle and sprayed pepper spray from the front of the vehicle through an open window in the driver's seat, spraying the father in the face, and the pepper spray then hit his 1-year-old daughter who was sitting behind him. And side note, although it should not matter, but it's sad I even have to say this, every person in that car was an American citizen. And the fact that we mention whether somebody is here, undocumented, is a citizen, is not, nobody should be treated that way, regardless of immigration status, regardless of what was happening that day. And this is just one example, one family on one day. Our teams have seen hundreds of cases involving excessive force, chemical agents, unjustified aggression against our neighbors. Another incident at 27th and Whipple, where Gregory Bovino pulled the pin through the gas grenade that was thrown with neighbors, including a dozen of my staff. I've had staff members taken by ICE, and in one instance, a staff member, after honking his horn and warning a neighbor of ICE presence in the area, 2 ICE agents left their vehicle, assault rifles drawn on him, opened his door, ripped him from the vehicle, slammed him to the ground, then took his keys, left his car in a tow zone, threw him in the back of a vehicle, and then took him to Broadview. No explanation, no warrant, no nothing. He was then given a ticket for obstructing and has court this month. I've seen hundreds of people taken from our church and programs, almost all of them with 0 criminal background. Many who have actually followed the legal process to be here, who have followed TPS, temporary protected status, who have followed asylum, who have crossed the border, quote unquote, legally, have done everything they were supposed to do, and are still taken, detained, and many deported back to some their original home country, and some to countries that aren't even their country of origin. And yet, through all of this, I've seen something beautiful. Chicago coming together. In response to Operation Midway Blitz, New Life Centers launched a 20,000 square foot community care resource hub, a warehouse filled with food, emergency supplies, clothing, and essential goods for families living in fear. We feed over 600 families a week through home delivery alone. We distribute thousands of items to partners citywide, and now we have over 100 partner organizations, faith-based institutions, and groups that are accessing free resources to support their communities. There's a network of thousands of rapid responders who have created rapid response network to arrive on the scene within minutes of ICE coming. There's Know Your Rights trainings that equip neighbors to know their rights and what to do and what not to do. There's a unified response team incorporating government, faith communities, nonprofits, and legal teams. Mutual aid groups have risen up to care for families in need, and Chicago is stepping up to care for neighbors. A new coalition that some of my colleagues here are part of, Faith Over Fear, is a multi-faith coalition that has risen up since September when we had the threat of federal intervention, and now has created this space where literally hundreds of people across Chicago, dozens of faith institutions are regularly gathering. We have Faithful Fridays where we take action. We have a weekly Wednesday gathering where anywhere from 40 to 60 faith leaders from across the city are regularly gathering. And we are standing up and saying, we want to see something different in Chicago. We will continue to care for our neighbors. We'll continue to live out the call to seek justice, to love mercy, and to walk humbly. We will keep showing up because our city deserves peace, dignity, and accountability. And we'll continue to center the need of neighbors documented, undocumented, whoever, because we believe that every man and woman is made in the image of God and deserves dignity and respect. Thank you.
Thank you, Pastor Matt, for your powerful testimony. And I have the privilege of working alongside Pastor Matt. So thank you for all of the work.
Mhm.
And 8 o'clock a.m. morning calls. With that being said, I want to open it up to the commissioners for questions.
So I'm wondering, when you and your staff and residents get assaulted, is there any planning, talk, interest in a legal action against the offending officers?
Yeah, great question. We've worked in some instances and cases with the National Lawyers Guild. They tend to take a lot of the cases of people who are citizens. And we've had multiple cases of that, multiple class action suits. Actually, the trial of Gregory Bovino has some of my staff as testimony there, those who saw the instance at 27th Whipple. We work with the Illinois Coalition of Immigrant Refugee Rights, the Resurrection Project, and their team of lawyers. So we work closely with those partners. We're in almost daily meetings. We have twice a week calls with government entities and those groups: ICER, Resurrection Project, New Life, Metropolitan Family Services, and others, Live Free, who are then responding and seeing what kind of lawsuits there are. So yes, if people are willing to, there's plenty of opportunity to do so.
Thank you for all you do.
Peace and blessing. Let me add my voice again. I have the profound honor of working alongside Pastor Matt. I do think it's important for the record to demonstrate that we do have faith leaders in the city that every single day are putting it all on the line in the most extraordinary manner possible, with profound humility. And irrespective of what your faith tradition is, you cannot but look at it and see the divine in the work. And I think, Pastor Matt, many of us who have had the privilege of working alongside that, see the divine in your work, my brother, and see that commitment to the love and grace of God every single day. So thank you for your work.
Appreciate you, man.
We have spent part of our afternoon talking a little bit about how we can continue to think about trauma at all levels. I think the two things I would ask you for the record to help better document is we're talking about generational trauma right now. I, as a young Palestinian, lived through iterations of what military occupation looks like, and will never forget encounters with a strip search or a being held at a border for the rest of my life. I know the communities that you are working with have encountered profound degradation. So I wonder what type of resources you've been able to access, first and foremost, to deal with the mental health trauma that is being inflicted and the state of the community that you're working with in that context. Secondly, I'd love to hear you talk about a sensitive issue that we were very honest with counsel from, maybe you were here in that conversation, and perhaps I'd love to get your experience. We know you have a long history of working along CPD, as many of us who've done violence intervention have. And in this case, have you run up against some of the tension and complication of moments of what may appear to look like collusion or data sharing challenges that your community has tried to navigate? If you could speak to that also.
Yeah, no, appreciate those questions. I think first, speaking to the trauma, shepherding and pastoring a church that is largely Latino, Spanish speaking. On Sunday afternoons, we have a congregation that speaks Quechua. It's a Guatemalan language. 6 months ago, that service had 350 people every Sunday afternoon. Now that service has 60 people. Our Spanish service are usually our largest service, with English being smaller. Now our Spanish services are anywhere from 30, 40, 50 people when they're usually 200, 250, 300. So just the fear of and trauma of not even going to a place of worship, which is for many the place of refuge, the place of sanctuary. When you respond to these instances, we're used to having done community violence intervention for 25 years. You respond to a shooting, and my violence interrupters, case managers, victim advocates are used to arriving at a scene where you have neighbors, you have perpetrators, you have victims, you have CPD, and then in that space, and then youth who are connected to the streets and the complexities of responding to stop violence. So we do that day in and day out. They're heroes doing that work all the time. When these instances come, we get the notification through Signal Chat, and we'll arrive to the scene, and my intervention workers will still arrive. CPD will arrive at times, and you'll have now ICE, CBP, federal entities, not clear who is who in those situations. Then you'll have politicians, you'll have neighborhood activists, you'll have rapid responders, you'll have neighbors who are in fear, all converging at a scene. It's quite complex, and the trauma is rampant in those spaces. What I've traditionally seen, historically seen in a lot of these, and I'm not obviously at all of them, there's different instances, many or majority are videoed. And we work closely with CPD in response of shootings. We've actually built the professional understanding. They know our role, we know their role. We have lines and separations. And to the testimony that was right before me, generally the quote and the approach from corporate CPD is we don't get involved. And I will say, from what I see, they do not insert themselves and get involved, almost to a frustrating point. And you can tell, I mean, I have relationship with officers as well. They have clear instructions not to intervene and get involved, but it feels powerless when the men and women, quote unquote, to serve and protect us are standing by watching as these agents who seem to have zero accountability are breaking windows, smashing people onto the ground, taking my own staff, throwing chemical agents, whatever happens. And so from a formal response and working with our district commanders, et cetera, there is no formal allowed intervention of CPD into these situations. And I think it would be, I mean, and there's frustration in these scenes. It is a live active scene of frustration, people yelling at officers, wondering why don't they intervene, people yelling at officers, why are they kind of standing with their backs to the ICE agents facing out to community. So it's complex situations. And in my conversations, again, it feels like their hands are tied, they're limited. I can't speak to specific spots or spaces where I feel like there was collaboration and things, but let me tell you, there are hundreds of community members who cry out about the collaboration that they see and the fact that CPD is not able to intervene. And it's almost like they're bystanders on the side who aren't able to intervene as community members are being pushed, assaulted, knocking on doors, et cetera. So it's this weird, invisible space. But I know of and hear of plenty of instances where the area is quite gray. Remind me the second question.
I think you spoke to both. One was just about the resources for trauma, what you're doing.
Yeah.
Perhaps.
Pastoral care, and there are connection to resources, but just like in the CVI field, the amount of trauma versus who is able to access resources to walk with is, I mean, the unlimited need to quite limited resources. And in our community, another layer is bilingual therapists, bilingual. So my staff, per usual, works as walking with mentor, and we've started mobile units where we're taking kids to and from school because families are afraid to do so. We're delivering to homes food, like I said, 600 a week because families are afraid to go to the grocery store. And so just those layers of, I mean, I can't imagine myself, imagine yourself, and maybe Rami, to your testimony, you have lived experience in that way. To leave your home in the morning, feel like you're being hunted. Your children go to school wondering if mom and dad will be home when they get home. So my wife works in CPS, and to see the trauma of students who are wondering if their parents will be there when they get home. parents who are wondering if I can safely go to get my kid because these agents can pop up at any time and rip me from the streets. And I will say for the record, when people are taken, there is zero due process. I have yet to see a single warrant, not once, not once. They are usually taken to the holding center at Broadview in some ways, and then many within 12, 24, 36, 48, while being held in deplorable conditions, are then sent to Michigan, Kentucky, Indiana, Louisiana, and Texas with zero communication, and we may not hear from them for 72 to plus hours. And then from there, quite limited access to pastoral counsel, legal counsel, or any of the things. And in some cases, they're in another country within 6 days.
Pastor Matt, you you mentioned faith over fear. There's a Faithful Friday at Broadview. That isn't the only faith contingency that goes out to Broadview. They've been going out for some years now. But can you give your particular experience when the group attempted to provide pastoral care to
Yeah.
those detained in Broadview?
Yeah, so the Broadview facility has been there for decades. There's been groups holding prayer there for decades faithfully every single week. Obviously, in the last 6 to 7 months, it's become a holding center, processing center, whatever you want to call it, boarded up, zero access. And so there's been countless actions there at Broadview. Our Faith Over Fear, first Faithful Friday was outside of Broadview. We held prayer service, worship service. And then at the end, we had already talked to Illinois State Police and others that we would like to gain access for pastoral care. And so we were able to make a call through the Illinois State Police to the ICE agent who was working the desk. We were told, hey, somebody's not here right now, but we can get, you can call back in 45 minutes. And I think we almost felt, are we actually going to get in here? And then we were then rejected for access. And since, I have yet to see any groups who have been given access. There's a few politicians who've been given access. There's legal access now, but I have seen almost zero pastoral access for care in those spaces. And families and people who are detained there, and it's not a detention center, are again piled in too many people in a room, limited access to bathrooms, poor access to food and care. And so we have been calling for pastoral care to be able to enter the space. But at that Faithful Friday, we were denied access.
I have a question. Pastor Matt, good to be with you in this space. Thank you for coming today and for taking the time. I want to ask you about something that has not been talked about by anybody yet. And I want to connect it to some of the history that we heard first thing yesterday morning. So I want to point out that the city of Chicago has a huge issue with missing and murdered Black women and girls. And so into that context, we have agents coming who are masked, unidentifiable, driving cars that are rental cars. And we've heard reports of people disappearing. And so a lot of people who are involved on the ground refer to what's happening as kidnappings, abductions. And so I want you to say for the record what you know about people who have disappeared, meaning nobody has located them yet. Do you know anything about those cases? And the other thing I'd like to hear about is why it is in the face of that we can't call on CPD to come and intervene, which could potentially force agents to have to unmask and identify. Like even when somebody says, I'd like to see your identification, they refuse. They won't say a name. They won't say what agency they're from. And so my question is around the issue of human trafficking and how, anybody can get a whole uniform off of the internet and put some masks on. And so are you hearing anything in your community about that? Do you know anything about that? And then what are your thoughts about trying to figure out a way for CPD to get involved in what we would call abductions and kidnappings?
Yeah, no, thanks for that question. I've seen hundreds at this point of abductions in front of my very eyes. We've all seen hundreds of videos. I have yet in the last 6 months to have a single agent identify themselves. 99% of agents are fully masked. Even in the instance that we have video of the agent reaching out with the spray, spraying the father and the baby in the story I mentioned, there's no way we can identify who that person was. We're piecing together video, we're piecing together, and it's near impossible. Because to your point, they're even switching the plates on these vehicles. And so we have tracking systems who are tracking the vehicles. When we see vehicles, we'll take pictures of plates and track that. But it's all done through rental companies with zero access. So I can tell you without a shadow of a doubt from my perspective that there has been zero identification. And so the fear is, how do we know that these are even federal agents? We do not know. They don't wear badges. They don't have name tags. Their faces are covered. And I've interacted with hundreds. And I have not a single once instance been given name, information, detail, et cetera. So to your point, many, I mean, we don't know and hear until we hear from them and have lawyers who can get access. So I don't hear of tons of cases where we don't end up finding out where they are, but they are happening for sure. And so the fear is, how can we hold people accountable? How can we, and again, how we train and what the legal route is. And I spoke on a commission to the Illinois Accountability Commission with a expert on chemical agents, et cetera. I mean, these chemical agents, by the way, are not legal to use in the United States. They're not legal to use in war. They are banned in international law to use in war. Yet here we are freely deploying them on American soil in cities across America, and they're highly. I mean, this baby, we don't know the long-term effects. She's had challenges breathing the last few months since this incident. And so if we play that out, there's no way right now we can hold that officer accountable or any officer accountable because we have no idea who these men and women are. So it's a huge problem. And on the record, it's a huge worry I have about where people are going. And again, due process. People who followed, there's a rhetoric that people who have come here, quote unquote, illegally, they should just get sent back and whatever. I have hundreds of people in our congregation and within the New Life Network who followed the process. They have the paperwork. They went all the way to temporary protected status, social security numbers. And now, as we see in Minneapolis, even refugee status is under attack. And so those who have followed the legal process and are quote unquote here legally are being targeted, are being taken, and there's zero due process.
The question I have, because you're a phenomenal person. I don't even know how you have the strength to sit here and answer questions. We owe you I mean, not just a round of applause. We owe you a measure of support in terms of you put your body on the line each and every day. So my question is, what can people who are watching this hearing do? What can the rest of us do to be a better service as we go into this new year? Because I know this is becoming, it's escalating. One thing I would recommend, we stop calling them agents. These people are not legal people. They're terrorists and they're criminals for the most part. They came from January 6th. So we need to stop giving them any kind of credibility because they're not credible. You walk around with a mask on. It's like Tonto and the masked man. So what can people do? They're watching to help.
Yeah.
How can this panel of commissioners really give you the kind of support that you need?
Yeah, no, it's a great question, and we're prepping. And again, I'm not sure this has been stated, but right in the peak of Operation Midway Bliss, we had 500 to 600 agents on the ground. Currently in Minneapolis, there's 4,000 agents on the ground. There were 10,000 agents nationwide before the end of the year. Now there's 22,000 agents and growing. And they will be back. And so as we prep for that, I think, tell the truth and be out there and respond. There are Know Your Rights trainings. You can connect to Illinois Coalition of Immigrant and Refugee Rights and other groups. Reverend Brown and a bunch of others do the trainings, and you can get a Know Your Rights training so you know what to do and what not to do, just as importantly, right? How do we protect people when we're out there? How do you film? How do you keep distance? How do you not intervene in certain ways and places? So get trained, and again, there's trainings all over. Then you can join a rapid response group if you're so inclined, and you'll be put into a signal. There's over 40 signal groups across the city. It's an amazing network of thousands of they're the real heroes in my mind. And the reason we can do the work is because of thousands of men and women across Chicago who rise up and do mutual aid and rapid response. Finding ways to serve those communities impacted. And I think, again, it's about speaking truth. And I struggled with it 6 months ago, how much we put out there and tell. But when I found a few of my first posts went viral across the nation, and people, I mean, immediately, I'll just tell you what we're up against. Immediately after I posted the video of the baby getting pepper sprayed, my video was on the DHS website within 2 days, and they debunk and my physical video, it had a big red stamp on it that said false. Like they debunked it. We ICE agents do not spray children, even though the video is fully there of an ICE agent spraying a child. It said that the video is not in the Sam's Club parking lot, even though you can see the Sam's Club sign. And so it's just blatant lies. And so how do we speak the truth? For us, our lens is faith, hope, and love. And so how do we care for those? Our New Life centering is on the neighbors who are impacted. And so it's getting connected to those groups and being able to support those groups. We have a resource hub that if you or your community or your faith group or your agency wants to be part of it, it's a free thing to become part of our community care group. We can get you food, we can get you emergency supplies, we can get you jackets, coats, whatever is needed for those families. But those families are in every neighborhood because we moved 6,000 families into every neighborhood across Chicagoland on the south and west side. And so those families are there. And this isn't, again, just an immigration, just a Latino issue. This is going to impact any and all of us. And so it's taking the small step and just starting. Sometimes we can look at a problem and say, what the heck am I going to do to stop this? And you feel powerless. You feel, and I feel powerless when I'm there and I don't have a badge. I don't have a gun. I don't have a bulletproof vest. I don't have a mask on. And we're up against a space in place with zero accountability. But we have to do something. We can't not do something. And so it's just take that first step. You can connect to any of those groups. You can talk to Live Free. You can talk to New Life. You can talk to Iman. You can talk to Dr. Brown. You have all of these spaces across the city. This is also on every corner of the city. It's amazing to see partners rise up. So I think I'm calling for people to get off the sidelines, stop waiting for the reinforcements to come. You are the reinforcements. And if we come together, we can take this on.
Thank you so much for your powerful testimony. Just one, I think for the record, it's important to identify what, if you know, what has been the economic loss to the community as a result of the ICE invasion?
Massive. Quantifying it would be hard, but I'll give you an example. 26th Street, where I live for the last 25 years, 26th Street has the second highest tax revenue next to Michigan Avenue. Strong business district, 1,000+ businesses. Over the last year, sales are down 60 to 80%. And these are mom and pop shops largely, where you go down 20%, you're at risk of, am I going to keep the doors open? And it's been a ghost town. And so all of these stores, restaurants, places, and spaces are being gutted. We've seen some close. And so another practical action is to support these local Black and Brown-led businesses who are struggling to keep their doors open. Go eat a meal in Little Village. Go eat a meal along 63rd Street and 47th Street, and find these spaces and places who need the support street vendors. I mean, we've encouraged people, hey, go find a lady selling tamales and man, buy her out. So A, she can get off the street and being at risk, and then bless others with that food. So finding ways we can economically make an impact, you can give to the group supporting. But another way is kind of intentionally change our shopping habits, move it away from the large corporations, many whom are supporting all that's happening, and move it towards how do you support these local Black and brown businesses. So I can only speak for Little Village, but it is crushing businesses in our communities.
I'll make it quick. Thank you so much for your testimony. Really appreciate it, Reverend. On this point about the propaganda, it's still very disturbing, amazing and disturbing how many people still support this. And or who are unwilling to believe what they see in the video, even when they see it, right? Last night there was a local alderman on a local news program, and I was actually quite shocked and disturbed on the words of someone who ought to know better, basically saying that ICE wouldn't be doing any of this were it not for the fact that we are a sanctuary city, and sort of blaming us and excusing the behavior of ICE, all these activities. Just any reflections that you might have. What is it going to take to convince the unconvincible, if you will? What's it going to take to overcome the propaganda that's being promulgated? I think when people left Nazi Germany, for example, theorists who came here were plagued with the question of why did people go along with this? And there's still so much complicity, whether it's complicity in Congress or complicity, by regular folks. So, I mean, just any thoughts you have on what's it going to take for people to be outraged?
It's a great question. I think one that's been asked since the dawn of time. Because we love to demonize the other, and we love to demonize the immigrant. We love to demonize, and it was an interesting. I won't go too far, but I had the opportunity in working. We went with a delegation from Chicago to New York City, and I had the opportunity to go to Ellis Island. And I'm Italian. My family came through in 1907, and so to see the writing on the wall in Ellis Island at the Statue of Liberty, right outside the Statue of Liberty, in these spaces where the Italians were demonized and saying, hey, here comes the WAPs, here comes the people without papers to steal our jobs, to steal all these things. It was the Irish, it was the Black community. I mean, every group that's otherized, right? And to me, the greatest way to do that is through the power of relationship, knowing something. You can't demonize somebody you know, and building a relationship and hearing. And I think I hear it all the time in Chicago. Well, the new arrival, and we hear it in the Latino community. The new arrivals came and, oh, they're stealing all this. I didn't get that. I didn't get the free handouts when I came here. And again, get to know somebody's story. Hear them, know their name, know who they are. And there's a group of people, bottom line, that will never change. Right? They're dug in. And I could show you a video. I could bring you out to the community. You could see it live in front of you. And they're not going to change. That's not the group I'm going to focus on. But there is a large majority in the middle, 60 to 80%, that through showing up consistently, showing them, hey, you can make a difference. And some days it feels like we're fighting a blazing fire with a little mini squirt gun, and are we ever going to take this thing out? And I mean, we just celebrated and passed through Martin Luther King Jr. Day on Monday, and we have examples throughout history that, hey, we got to come together. We got to stand shoulder to shoulder. We got to stop demonizing the other and start building those relationships and have the hard conversations. And like I led with a couple questions ago, tell the truth, speak the truth in love. So I could talk a lot more on that, but I think it's just through focusing where you can with the people group right around you, and start to stand up and speak the truth to power, and speak it in love as well.
Thank you
Pastor
so
Matt,
much.
Pastor Matt.
I'm sorry, we have to conclude
right.
this portion of it. Thank you so much, Pastor Matt.
Yeah.
We are going to quickly move forward to remain on time. I am going to call up Juan Munoz, who is the Oak Park Township Board of Trustees. Following Mr. Juan Munoz will be Deputy Governor Grace Hope. Once you are mic'd up, you may begin.
Just put your-
Thanks, sir. Good. Oh. Thank you, first of all, for having me. I really appreciate the space and time you've created. My name is Juan Munoz. I am a Oak Park resident and township trustee. I'm the first elected Latino trustee for the Oak Park Township. I am also a small business owner, and I serve as board president for a national nonprofit focused on early childhood home visiting and family services. I'm also a husband and father to 2 young children. I'm the son of Mexican immigrants, and like Attorney General Kwame Raoul, who spoke before you here yesterday, I'm a US citizen thanks to the 14th Amendment. I know firsthand the frigid welcome a community can give to new migrants, and I remember the silence of neighbors when people were taken sporadically by immigration raids. No protests, no uproar, and that silence was painful. These were communities across the United States with new migrants of mixed status, and it shapes how I choose to lead and how I respond to what is happening now. One of those communities was rural Minnesota, southern Minnesota, where I attended high school. In those summers, I worked in the soybean fields. And although it is no longer my home, I'm heartbroken that family and friends there now are experiencing what we went through, often worse. If the escalation tactics we are seeing goes unchecked, these tactics will not stay isolated. They will spread and they will show up in our communities. I'm here today because I am one of the first elected officials in Illinois to be detained during Operation Midway Blitz. And I am also the only elected official held inside the Broadview facility. Since my arrest and detention, I've submitted sworn declaration describing what happened to me and the terrible conditions I witnessed inside the Broadview Processing Center when it was misused as a detention facility. I also testified in the federal case about agents' use of force against US citizens and thanked the ACLU, Lovie and Lovie, and many other lawyers involved in those cases. What I'm sharing today is a portion of those facts of what happened. I chose to attend the protest at the ICE facility in Broadview on Friday, October 3rd, 2005, to show solidarity with protesters and for those who are unable to attend because of their status. I attended because what happens there affects all of our communities, including the constituents I represent. Our neighbors, our employees, our community members who are afraid to leave their homes, and people being detained and deported. When I arrived that morning, there was a much larger law enforcement presence from different departments, including the Illinois State Police. The Illinois State Police kept a clear path towards the ICE facility, vehicles repeatedly moving in and out. Shortly after I arrived, ICE agents gathered near the facility gate and began marching towards protesters, led by U.S. Customs Border Protection Commander Greg Bavino. When they reached the protesters, Commander Bavino gave vague instructions to move back while people were trying to comply with the directions. He escalated the situation by commanding his officers shortly thereafter to start arresting folks in the crowd. A federal agent instructed me to move beyond a guardrail. I did so, and he thanked me. I was complying with their ever-changing instructions, and I was filming with my phone because I had seen the escalation in these situations before. I had personally witnessed the escalation tactics used on people exercising their First Amendment rights, including pepper ball, munitions, rubber bullets, and tear gas. I was recording because I believed accountability required a clear and public record. While recording agents, I heard a disturbance behind me and began to walk away. That's when Commander Greg Bavino, who had just tackled an older gentleman, pulled me to the ground. As soon as I was on the ground, he smacked the phone out of my hand and ordered me arrested. He told me to turn onto my stomach. Shocked, I was turning and told him that I was an elected official, and he did not respond. I continued to repeat those words, but zip ties were placed on my wrist, and I was moved to the middle of that parking lot and was surrounded by agents and other protesters who had been arrested. At that point, photographers and videographers were near the agents and filming us, the arrested protesters, and the agents themselves. We were held outside in handcuffs for 40 minutes with no explanation. Then a handful of SUVs began to move out of the facility. When one of them stopped, Secretary of Homeland Security Kristi Noem exited and gave an interview to a right-wing influencer using us as a backdrop. This is when it became clear that the arrests, the photos, the videos being recorded were being used for their propaganda. After Kristi Noem left, we were taken inside the facility. The harm was not just the arrest, it was how quickly a peaceful protest turned into suppression and how little accountability existed in that moment. While being led towards the facility, I told one of the agents that I was an elected official again. The agent asked me if my restraints were too tight. I said they were, and they did nothing. Weeks after the event, I still had numbness in my hand. We were held inside the facility for 8 hours. We were questioned by FBI agents and asked politically framed questions: if we were paid to be there, if we had come from out of state, how we had organized to be there. I had requested an attorney by name who was outside of the facility and was told that no lawyers were being allowed in. I was then processed by an immigration agent and assigned a case number in their system. I was not sure at this time if I was being processed as a protester or because of my name, Juan Munoz, being found somewhere in their system, and was going to be detained and held and processed in a different manner from the other detainees, and began to fear to what the consequences were for me being inside of that facility. After almost 3 hours, I was able to connect with my wife through a phone call. She knew that I had been taken, but didn't know why or where. She was scared, angry, confused, and that fear and anger, once planted, is difficult to uproot and continues to affect how we operate today. I want to speak clear about what I observed inside of that facility. The conditions were degrading and unsanitary. Minimal privacy, poor air circulation, and the smell of excrement. The toilet area was filthy, and people had to share shoes left behind by previous detainees because they had had their shoes removed while being processed. While we were detained, a young man was brought in with his father during one of the immigration enforcement activities. He had visible scrapes and swelling along his jaw and neck, and had injuries on his arms and legs. He had received these injuries while being detained with his father. Although he was a US citizen, he was detained and held inside of the facility along with the other detainees, and he was not provided medical attention while we were there. As mentioned, I was detained for 8 hours, and at the end of those 8 hours, we were given no information at any point or next steps about what was to happen. At the end of those 8 hours, we were led to a black van and driven to a gas station 1.5 miles away from the facility and dropped off with our belongings and no other information. This sends a chilling message. If you protest, if you film, if you speak, federal power can be used against you. I want to close with some observations. In Minnesota, the situation is escalated because of a couple of conditions. One of them being that counties and sheriff's offices have cooperation agreements with the federal government, arrangements that Illinois limits through laws like the Way Forward and the Trust Act, and now the Safety Act. However, if these tactics that are being deployed nationally continue to escalate, and we're honest about what makes them possible, we need to take action now. There's a facility in Dilley, Texas, a private detention facility that was used previously to hold families that has had their contract renewed as of March of last year. This facility was observed and helped to be closed by an Illinois lawyer, the first Latina lawyer in Illinois, Virginia Martinez, and her work is now being undone. I would strongly encourage the Attorney General, the Illinois Attorney General, to continue to monitor, investigate the cooperation, collaboration, and support that may be provided by our own local and state police, especially when state resources are used in ways that enable federal abuse. The right to protest, the right to speak is not a threat. It's foundational. If the 14th Amendment means anything, it is not just the right to citizenship, it means equal protection and due process for all, including those who dissent, those who look like me, and those from immigrant communities. And when harm occurs, there must be repair, access to legal counsel, trauma support, transparency, and accountability. I'm here as someone deeply committed to my community, as a small business owner, as a nonprofit leader, as an elected official, and as a father. I don't want anyone else to go through what I went through or worse. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Now we will move forward to questions from the commission. Do you want to begin?
Yes. Again, thank you for your testimony and the experiences that you had were basically inhumane. And my question or comment looks more at the context in which all of this takes place. It doesn't sound like the United States. It sounds like some country we hear about on the news. What do you think can be done in an unrational situation that will short circuit these kinds of events that you've experienced?
I think it is working within the context of our country, so the balance of power. And so we are seeing a lot of it take place in the courts. So I have been part of a couple of the cases brought against the federal government for the conditions inside the facility, for the actions of the agents, and there has been some reprieve. So they're no longer overfilling that facility. It's no longer being, as far as I know, misused as a detention facility because of the actions of that court. We can do things at the local level. We can continue to pressure folks at the state level, but ultimately it will take changes at the national level, that the agency that is conducting this abuse, what is the the reason for them to exist is, is there enough egregious acts that they're creating that it justifies abolishing their existence? That, immigration enforcement has happened in this country for many, many years since the beginning, right? So that happened before the creation of ICE. It can continue to happen after. So we experienced detentions and deportations as a community far before ICE was created. So really, what is the purpose of this agency? Is it to perpetuate the abuses and the, being able to carry out the agenda of, a very right-wing authoritarian style of government, which is what it feels like is happening now.
It is. We should have met before. I live in Oak Park. Thank you for showing up today and to show up in the way that you have with, as our previous testifier mentioned, Pastor Mateo, I think, said we just have to tell the truth, right? We know that part of my lens is from the international human rights law perspective. And one of the things I wanted to just lift up to you is that, of course, as a fellow Oak Parker, I've been following this very, very closely. Also, as I have teens who are part of programming that I provide, who were sprayed or shot actually around the Halloween period with the pepper ball, bullet, whatever, and there was some. How do I say, there were multiple entities there, law enforcement entities there. The Oak Park police, although it was in Oak Park, stated that they were not taking those violent actions, but a partner or participating neighboring police department did. But again, to the point of what your testimony and so many others illustrates, is we just don't know. We don't know. I think also a couple of prior people speaking share that we don't even know that it's law enforcement, right? So just the multiple layers of the harms, but also the domestic terror that it sounds like it is. So I have a couple questions as you're continuing to move through the legal process with defense. Is that right?
So many of those cases have
yours.
So mine is a separate civilian. What do they call it? It's not through the federal courthouse. Yeah.
Okay. So what I'm wondering is if there have been any conversations with any of your legal counsel with regards to the international human rights law and the application here. We've only been hearing primarily about civil rights, right? And the words human rights. So just urging everybody to really uplift that and begin to apply it. We've heard through testimony that other folks, that the other side, if you will, is disregarding the law. So the importance of looking at really reviewing the mechanisms internationally, and I will lift up, for example, the working group on arbitrary detention, and just places where even your testimony in the report that we have to provide back can potentially be helpful. So I'm trying to wrap my mind around a lot of things that I really want to say to you, but I won't take the time here to do that. Again, as someone who's been a part of this work for a long time and has been targeted for being a part of this work, and that you don't go back from that. It's only forward. So we will lock arms and move forward together.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for both what you've been through and for coming here today. I'm curious, I can imagine in Oak Park, you've got a lot of community support and backing for what you've been through. But I'm also wondering, have you gotten blowback, and is there a segment of the community that assumes it's your fault, and what are you hearing? I'm so concerned about how we see the other, and what your experience has been in that regard.
There has been instances of negative reaction to, me being detained that places the blame back on me, that why was I there, right? So the simple explanation is I'm an elected official and I was there to observe and to protest in solidarity, and that's enough to, be protected under the First Amendment. But the biggest negative impact has been the right-wing media. So the pictures and videos that was taken that day was published on the Department of Homeland Security's Facebook page, describing our actions as violent, ourselves as terrorists, attacking ICE officers, attacking police officers, including video from a right-wing influencer that described us and specifically me as a left-wing terrorist taking action that day. So very extreme language from what was essentially a violation on my own rights being then turned around, and these lies being told to try to portray our actions as something that they were not. So the only way that I have found to try to counteract that is with truth, right? So telling my story when many others can't or are too afraid to. So there is a responsibility to represent my community, one as just an elected official of Oak Park, but just my lived experience as a Latino man to be able to tell my story. And even though I can't tell other stories, at least let folks know that, they can tell their own stories. There will be, unfortunately, negative reactions at times, and I've heard some of them personally, but that doesn't negate the truth. So as long as the truth is told, that feels like enough. And that's kind of the work that I'm doing now, and the work of protecting some of our communities as well, advocating for protections at the local level. So in Oak Park, we passed an ordinance at the township to protect the property of the township from being misused for federal law enforcement, supporting same legislation or changes to ordinance at the village level that oversees the police department, and supporting surrounding communities to do the same. So we're trying to continue that work.
Thank you.
I have a question.
Okay, I just want to jump in really fast, and then I'll pass it to you. And then was the question down here? Okay, so we'll end with you two. Okay. My question is, I know that, and forgive me if I missed this in your testimony, there's the nickname of the Oak Park 6 or Oak Park 9.
Yes, the Broadview 6, one of them is a village trustee, Brian Straw, who's now being federally indicted on charges politically motivated, along with 5 others. Yes. So they're now having to defend themselves against those federal cases. And, I've shown my support for Brian, and, it's going to be a long journey just to be able to, unless they drop those charges, it's going to be a long journey.
Have you at any point been represented by counsel?
Yes, I'm currently
Are
represented.
you now represented?
Yes.
Have you filed both state and federal lawsuits?
I can't comment on this time.
I don't want you to
Yeah.
tell me about your lawsuit. I
Yeah.
just want to know, have you filed one?
Not filed yet, no.
Thank you for your testimony. Really appreciate it. You know, congressional officials, other elected officials have been denied access to any of these detention facilities to be able to observe. And you are in a position at least to share 3 hours of experience. You described those conditions. I wonder if there's anything more you could add about what was going on during those times. What were people doing? And if you have any insights or speculations on experiences of those who maybe are detained for longer, because it's so secretive. Nobody's able to get access to find out sort of what the details are of what's happening inside those facilities.
Right. Yeah, and I did submit a declaration that helped address some of what was happening at the facility that is no longer happening. So I was there for 8 hours inside the cell, and really it was about the conditions that they kind of allowed to happen, and not providing enough resources for if you were being held in a county jail, you have an access to a shower, hygiene products, you're able to sleep on a bed. You're able to do none of those at the detention facility. So while we were there, the cells themselves are fairly bare. They have seating that you can sit on and uncomfortably lay on. But the conditions of the sanitary conditions were the worst, right? They had not cleaned those facilities in multiple days, maybe weeks. The trash cans were half filled, including the trash can by the open toilet that offered very little privacy, that was overflowing with used tissue paper. And that smell of a mix of the food wrappers and uneaten food from the trash can that was half filled with the toilet area, it was just a horrible smell. Very bad ventilation. They weren't cleaning the floors, and they had taken folks' shoes away, so they were walking around in their socks. And they were sharing a pair of slippers that the previous detainee had left behind to be able to go and use the toilet area. What we observed kind of from ourselves, that we had a window into the central bullpen where people were being processed. The agents were on a bank of computers. And you can see what you normally don't see, which is unmasked agents, right? And they were going about their day like they were working in a normal office. And that kind of adds to this, normalcy to the process, this bureaucracy to processing people, to being ripping people away from their communities, that they were just going to their office to work. They were joking. They were, sharing food. They were, just in the workplace with themselves. And it oddly makes it, more sinister that they see this as a way to just make a livelihood. And even the way that they would frame the questions, that when they processed us, they were asking us demographic information, name, phone number, address, but they would ask also occupation. One of the detainees did not want to, risk his job, so he said, "I'd rather not answer that question." The agent said, "Well, I assume you're unemployed, so I'm gonna write down unemployed." So they have this narrative that they've created about who is protesting, who is standing up against the federal government. And I think that's a way to justify showing up to work and making it through the day for them. So being able to see that firsthand is oddly humanizing and discouraging at the same time, that that you can create a sense of normalcy to the process of ripping families apart.
So I'm going for our final question. I'm going to combine them. So if you both can ask the question and then you respond to there.
Yeah, and I'll make it quick. Thank you so much for your testimony, but also for your courage. I want to say it's not everybody who will experience what you've experienced and then go on record saying all of the things. And so I want to acknowledge that there's an added level of courage needed, but also an added level of risk. So thank you for that, because it's important that we get these stories out. Have you received any threats, and do you feel fear for your family in having your testimony on record in a lawsuit?
There is a risk. One, there's a couple of factors. One is the community that we live in, Oak Park, is very supportive, which is wonderful. And two is that my position, even though I'm newly elected, I was elected in April and detained in October, but there is a sense of responsibility for the position that I hold. So that is two motivations, but I do see the risk, and I do feel some of the fear, we might call it paranoia, when there were ICE agents that were driving around the Oak Park neighborhood in a white van with blacked out windows. A white van with blacked out windows stopped in front of my car in front of my house for much longer than was comfortable. And I felt paranoid that because I do have a Mexican flag outside of my home, that either being targeted because of that or because of my detention, it felt that I was being watched. So a quote ran through my head is that just because I'm paranoid doesn't mean I'm wrong. So we're being cautious. We're kind of going in eyes wide open that there is a risk.
This is probably a good follow-up to this question. First, thank you also for your courage and vulnerability and willingness to come and share what happened. I want to know if you, and I'm saying this to you personally, but also to all who have come and shared witness around what they've experienced and the kind of trauma that they've experienced. We carry trauma in our bodies. We carry generational trauma in our bodies, and we have children who are carrying this. Now, you talked about the fear that has altered how you operate right now, forever. And so I don't have a question. I hope that you have access to resources that can help you navigate the trauma. We mentioned that earlier. And in the spirit of Reverend Dr. Jeanette Wilson, who just got up, let us know how we can help you and persons in your community with that specifically. Right? We have a trauma healing initiative here at McCormick. There are persons across the city who are doing trauma healing work. There's this cliche now almost where people say, oh, you need Jesus and a therapist, right? And we agree, but therapy costs money. And a lot of people who are poor in our communities can't afford therapy. And so let us know how we can help you to point you towards free services, persons who volunteer pro bono or who can assist us with the trauma work. We can't wait until after this is over to start responding to how trauma is impacting our communities now.
Thank you.
Juan, I want to personally thank you for coming. We met because I read an article about you, and you were so gracious to talk and to agree to present your narrative. I want our record to reflect the fact that it's clear there's a lot we need to do to delve into lessons learned from genocide studies. The steps of ostracism, demonization, separation, divide and conquer are before our eyes. And you have testified for us in ways that compel us to at least look back in terms of a Sankofa methodology to understand what has happened with other people in other contexts, to understand what is happening right now so that we can create a different future than what those who are in control have for our futures to be. And so, thank you.
No, of course, thank you,
Thank you
Dr.
for your courage.
No, and thank you all for the time, and I know the work that's ahead of you all, so thank you as well.
At this moment, thank you so much. And as we transition into the next portion of the agenda, did Grace leave? Okay. Well, we're gonna take a 2-minute stretch break.
I like the spiritual break. That was the spiritual break. Well, what the batteries on that?
Okay, thank you.
All right. Let's scoot up a little bit more. This microphone will cover you just fine, so don't worry about it. May I come this on you, please?
Yes.
Okay. And we'll do it right. Right.
So
And,
both of them are on?
yes, both of them
Okay.
are on. This is going direct to camera. That's for the.
Oh, got it, got it, got it, got it.
On the screen. Okay, so before you get up, I'll be watching you. Release you.
Okay, all right. Thanks. What's your name?
Tony.
Tony, thanks. Grace. Yep, yep.
Ready to roll the report. Quiet on the set, seats, places. Everybody rolling?
Yes.
Take a step to your right. 9. Truth telling. Say the words first and then clap loud. Truth telling. Session 9, day 2.
Good afternoon. We welcome Deputy Governor Grace Ho for her testimony. You may begin.
Thank you, Reverend Sierra. Good afternoon, members of the commission. It's a pleasure to be here. My name is Grace Ho, and I am the Deputy Governor for Health and Human Services in the Office of Governor J.B. Pritzker. I was formerly the Secretary of the Illinois Department of Human Services up until about a little bit over 2.5 years ago. So as Deputy Governor, and then also in my previous role as Secretary of the Illinois Department of Human Services, I have led our state's response to meet the immediate needs of new arrivals who are bused here from Texas to Illinois, and now in deep partnership with community and other governmental entities face this extraordinary challenge of aggressive and cruel federal immigration enforcement. Thank you for inviting me to share our work and for dedicating so much of your time to listening and amplifying stories and truths. I began my career as in the social services field as a provider and an advocate for immigrant and refugee communities and rights here in Chicago many, many years ago. And I've also had the opportunity to learn and participate in truth and racial healing with some of you here when I was at Woods Fund Chicago, the foundation that served as the initial anchor organization for the national effort around truth, racial healing, and transformation. I understand the power of story and how it can unite us. Illinois has a strong history of being a welcoming state, fueled by community leaders united in their fight for resources and policies that support immigrant integration into our communities, knowing that this was the compassionate and economically prudent thing to do. We are home to over 1.8 million immigrants. 1 in 7 of us Illinoisans are immigrants. Further, another almost 1 million Illinois children are being raised by an immigrant parent, myself included, although maybe I'm already raised, not true. We know that there is an overrepresentation of immigrants in key workforce sectors, billions grossed annually across federal, state, and local tax revenue, and all the unspoken ways that make us stronger and more vibrant. One of the first actions that Governor J.B. Pritzker took was to resource funding back in 2019 to reactivate our Illinois welcoming centers all across the state. Our administration, with the support from the Illinois General Assembly, has increased its resources in immigrant groups and sought to restore connections and partnerships with community and faith-based organizations. And state policies, including the Trust Act, the Way Forward Act, the Safe Schools for All Act, and most recently, the governor signed House Bill 1312 into law, an omnibus bill that advances several key policies to protect immigrants from unjust federal actions. This legislation enshrines protections for immigrant families in Illinois, including requiring planning for law enforcement activity in sensitive locations like daycares and hospitals, and providing a pathway to legal recourse for Illinois residents who have experienced violations of the Illinois or U.S. Constitution during enforcement actions. Between the months of September and October, our state and city experienced immigration enforcement action that was unprecedented in scale, violence, and chaos. It has been reported that out of the 3,400 arrests made by ICE in Chicago last year, of those people who were detained, only 3% were violent criminals. Childcare workers going to work, parents dropping their children off at school, college students, construction workers, landscapers, and on and on. Time and time again, we saw and experienced this terror and disregard for human dignity. Attempts to gain any semblance of accountability or explanations from the federal government have been routinely met with lies and denial. It is incumbent on us as individuals and institutions of influence to uplift the voices of communities and document the truth in the face of this blatant dishonesty, and I commend the work of the HART Commission in doing just that. Across government, nonprofits, faith, business, philanthropy, and community, we in Illinois have shown that our welcoming values are worth fighting for. Recognizing that there are a variety of ways that Illinois serves immigrant communities, I'm going to focus on the state's preparation and response to Operation Midway Blitz, and I want to highlight 6 specific areas. First, some of you were there. We work with business, community, civic, and other leaders and organizations to proliferate Know Your Rights information and materials widely. We began this work in November of 2024, knowing that immigration enforcement would be a high priority of the Trump administration. Little did we know how cruel and unusual it would be. Number 2, we facilitated and invested in a comprehensive community response system. The Immigrant Family Access Hotline program is funded by the Illinois Department of Human Services and is supported by ICER and other community groups, including the Resurrection Project, NIJC, and others. We are one of the few states in the country to have a centralized statewide hotline connecting callers to legal, community, and family resources. A call into the statewide hotline triggers a series of response networks and resources that can be available for community members. Number 3, the state supported the expansion of legal services for immigrants and immigrant communities. The Department of Human Services funds the Access to Justice program as well as the Immigrant Legal Support Program. Number 4, I understand that Attorney General Raul was here yesterday and testified. We work very closely in collaboration with his office that has fueled a lot of the litigation to reduce some of the harm that has been bestowed by many of our community members. And number 5, in the same spirit as HART, and hopefully one day accountability, Governor Pritzker signed an executive order on October 23rd of last year that launched the Illinois Accountability Commission, a body designed to, number 1, create a public record of the conduct of federal agents during Operation Midway Blitz and the Trump administration's military-style operations throughout the Chicagoland area. Number 2, examine the impact of that conduct on individuals and communities. And number 3, consider policy recommendations to prevent future harm to these individuals and communities. The commission had its first hearing in December, will issue its interim report at the end of this month, next week,
and have several additional hearings before the issuance of its final report at the end of April. The commission launched the information submission interest form this past Friday that is available for members of the public and other individuals who would like to provide information to the Illinois Accountability Commission in a safe way. For those individuals who are interested in submitting information potentially to the IAC, visit www.ilac.illinois.gov. Like you, we hope and believe that there will one day be people and leaders of good faith at the federal level that will take this work and hold people accountable for their misdeeds. Finally, I wanted to share most recently, as reported in some news outlets today and last night, our Illinois Department of Human Rights is initiating an investigation into reports that building owners and management of the South Shore apartment buildings violated the state's Human Rights Act. Yesterday, the Illinois Department of Human Rights filed a formal housing discrimination charge against the owners and managers of the building, targeted in the widely publicized raid by federal agents on September 30th. So many of us saw those images. The department will investigate allegations that the building owner and management tipped federal officials about the presence of Venezuelan immigrants in the building to intimidate and coerce the building's Black and Hispanic tenants into leaving the building. It's important to note that the filing of a charge actually begins the formal investigation by the Illinois Department of Human Rights. If they find substantial evidence of discrimination and the matter cannot be settled or conciliated, the Department of Human Rights can file a complaint with the Illinois Human Rights Commission on behalf of all tenants and people residing in the building at the time of the raid. In closing, I want to emphasize that what we do, everything that we do in partnership with community and faith-based leaders. Having dedicated my whole career in public service, whether in social services, nonprofit, philanthropy, I believe that anything that we do, we have to do together in order to confront the issues that we are facing right now. Under the leadership of our governor, I am truly, genuinely proud of our response, and I recognize that our true strength is our unity with community. These have been really challenging times. I don't have to tell you that. And what we see now happening in Minnesota is truly heartbreaking. Even as our hearts have broken for the individuals here in our community, we are fearful of what is yet to come back again. Like you, we need to do more than lament. We need to call out the injustices and the cruelty and do all in our power to protect human and civil rights. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Governor Grace. I also just want to continue to thank you for all of the work that you and the governor's office is doing on this, as well as really leading a community, intercommunity and government call and work every week. And I witness this work. So I'm so glad that we have people like you working in the governor's office. With that being said, I want to open this up to the commission for questions. Yes.
Thank you for being here, Deputy Governor. And obviously, the governor and your office deserve a lot of credit for the steps that are being taken. One of the most moving moments we, as a Truth Commission, had in the past 2 days was hearing the testimony of a woman who is a resident of the South Shore apartment. And describing her 8-year-old nephew who will be forever traumatized by what he saw that night. And it left the question among members of this commission, I'm sure, about what the state might do for emergency funding for long-term trauma care for all of the people across the city and state who are suffering abuses.
So I would really love to review their testimony. and potentially connect them with the Department of Human Rights. I would say that one of the strategies that we have yet to, I would say, fully fund or fully figure out is how do we provide mental health and behavioral health supports for individuals who have been traumatized. I think we have a very strong Department of Human Services that houses the Division of Behavioral Health and Recovery. And one of the things that we've been discussing with them and philanthropy is what would a broad kind of far-reaching healing process look like. There's been so much fallout with individuals who have been impacted all across the region. And so I think one of the things that I would say again and again is that we would want to lean on our community-based organizations to help us identify those individuals who need to be connected to care. We work really closely with the Illinois Family Resource Program, IFRP, as well as the welcoming centers who have, I think, readily connections to other mental health services, but of course, it's not at the scale that it needs to be.
The issue is money as much as anything.
I would say money as well as workforce capacity. We also need folks to be connected to culturally and linguistically appropriate services as well. So I think absolutely money is a part of the equation.
I think the governor and his office you all have really stepped up in this crisis. I'm wondering, can we use the Illinois Crime Victims Compensation Act for victims who are suffering from these crimes? We gotta name it. It's an Illinois crime if they don't want to call it federal. And that way you get all of the resources. You get relocation, you get money for health care, medical care. If they can take advantage of that, I think that's something we need to look at. And secondly, I'm wondering how do you communicate what you are doing in a broader way? I know maybe it's a newsletter, maybe it's a 5-minute or 3-minute commercial that goes into social media that we also send out, because you're doing a lot of stuff that most people, if they're not in this little group, don't know about. What do you think?
So on the first issue, I think that's a good idea. We'll look in to see whether there are opportunities for restitution or reparation in some form. And number two, I think I'm always so busy doing, I don't concentrate enough on communicating. And of course, the best spokesperson we have is our governor, and he tries to get out and communicate what we're doing as much as possible. And I think to Reverend Sierra's point, we do meet 2 times a week with the community leader organizations as well as faith leaders to communicate what we're doing in that way. But I actually welcome ideas. I like the newsletter idea if people think that it would be valuable to do. We're trying to post more information on the Illinois Accountability Commission website. Maybe that's a place for it to happen. But I think, thank you for your appreciation, and we'll give it some really good thought as to how to share what we're doing more broadly.
Thank you so much for being here. Again, echoing what my esteemed colleagues have shared. I wanted to uplift something that Commissioner Reverend Dr. Otis Moss III said, I think yesterday, which is that we have an algorithm problem, right? There's so much propaganda. And so as we think about not only using the traditional communications means, general populace and our youth need to see in the places that they are paying attention. So that makes me wonder if there is space for, a cadre of young folks. I think about the, former street law corps of directly impacted people who were helpful in putting together some of the original Know Your Rights work with volunteer lawyers and so forth, with First Defense Legal Aid. that has allowed, I think, a quicker start to the expanded Know Your Rights Now that's been modified, that's been used by National Lawyers Guild and so many others. We're building as well for the next onslaught, right?
Mhm.
And is there a space, perhaps funding, but the learning for youth cadres that are really, really great at developing this content already, but don't have access maybe. And the last thing is, as you're making laws or the governor's making laws, there are state laws to your point, applying the international human rights law framework and not staying in that box of civil rights, which has served us very well up to a point, but it's being disregarded by, someone called it ops yesterday, and I think that's, what we're experiencing. And then specifically, is there a domestic terror law? I think there's not in the US federally, at least there wasn't the last time we looked with ICRM. And that's what we're hearing that we're experiencing. So thank you.
Really good insight, thank you.
Deputy Governor, thank you for being here today.
Of course.
And I want to, so much is happening and obviously so many good things. I was really encouraged to hear that, that now an investigation is going to happen into the management and owners of the South Shore building, because we were just meeting with them after the testimony this morning about them needing legal representation to bring a case against the agents who terrorize them. So I'm wondering if there are any resources at the state level to provide legal assistance to them. If not, we certainly know people we can meet with to try to get them represented in some kind of federal lawsuit against the agents who did all that they did. My second question, and this is one, we've had conversation about this before, the role of the Illinois State Police and certainly the Sheriff's Department, particularly related to Broadview. And I know we had our meeting, and then shortly after that, November 14th, there was a big clergy action out there. And so many of my colleagues and friends were violently thrown to the ground, and many of them harmed. I could tell you specific names of people who are still suffering from their injuries. When you see video of them, you can see they're just walking very slowly. So there was no violence coming from them, and the Illinois State Police and the Cook County Sheriffs were very violent. I know they've addressed this with you. They've tried to write letters, and letters were written back, and it's gotten nowhere. And so I'm wondering if there is more repair that can happen. I think in their minds, repair can't happen without accountability, and there's been very little accountability. But I'm also wondering, as we're all anticipating that what's happening in Minnesota is coming here next, can we have assurance from the governor that the Illinois State Police and the Sheriff's Department are not going to add to the violence that we are anticipating is already going to be coming? So those are my questions.
Thank you, Pastor Bass. So the first is, we would absolutely appreciate being connected to those individuals who were impacted by what happened at South Shore. And secondly, I would say, so Deputy Governor Scudder oversees the Illinois State Police, and I'm not trying to pass the buck at all. I am just clarifying. So, and I'm aware that letters have been transmitted to us and letters have been transmitted back. And I am also aware, and we sent correspondence to community members around recent changes that had been made at Broadview related to the protest area, as well as the Jersey barriers being taken down. And I know that there are ongoing conversations that the governor and the deputy governor are having with state police. As you mentioned, it is a unified command, so it includes the Broadview Police with the Cook County Sheriff's Office and the Illinois State Police. I think in terms of,
I think you asked for assurance. I think that is the goal. I can say with 100% certainty that the goal of our office is to reduce violence and to not be a part of it. And so what I can't sit here today and say is what exactly that looks like. And, you know, as I said in my remarks, I don't think any big thorny problems can be resolved with one sector, whether they're government or community or faith and business. So we welcome the opportunity to figure this piece out together. I explained to you and others the complicated dynamics of even having law enforcement at Broadview. That was a really difficult decision and calculus that was made as it relates to the larger issue around National Guard activation. So what I hope is that we remain united and that there is trust that we are trying to protect people to the greatest extent possible. And I really feel terribly about what happened to your colleagues, Pastor Beth. And I want to do what I can in my role to support it. But I do know that it is a top priority, and we haven't found the magic sauce yet.
I'm going to try to be quick because I know we're getting close. But first of all, Deputy Governor, it's amazing having you. For those of us who work with you for so many years and have been in many of those organizing spaces with you long before you were in public service, know that you get it, and you've brought that sensibility to organizing. And I think in that spirit, I'm going to just talk to you still as an organizer, and follow up on Reverend Beth's point is, and you know, part of that work that the deputy governor left was about the framework of human rights and racial reconciliation that you led when you were at Woods. I would say, I would really encourage you on that last point that if the state of Illinois and this governor continues to want to lead, and I think he has demonstrated extraordinary leadership, that when and where there's an opportunity to have the very transparent forms of reconciliation publicly, so that incidences of a harm, we don't come off as being hypocritical about these profound denunciations of what it looks like when ICE, and then we are making lots of complicated excuses for when it's happening locally with either state or county officials. I would encourage you to find ways to very quickly expedite the tape of public, testimonials that we're doing now to show that the state of Illinois is very serious, irrespective of who is perpetrating that harm, whether it's one of our own or whether it's, someone who took a $60,000 student loan repayment from our own communities. We cannot pretend these ICE agents don't look like us. They look like a lot of our folks, and they're falling to that. And that's my last point as well. I just want to offer this to you, and I know that we spoke about this. We're getting 60th anniversary of King coming to Chicago this summer. To reflect on the language that King used very explicitly, he talked about evil. What we heard, Juan Munoz's testimonial, I couldn't help but thinking about Hanan Arendt's The Banality of Evil. And to begin to start using that language more explicitly, we are confronting, King talked about triple evils, we are confronting an evil. And it's an evil that we're not free from. It's an evil that we can easily find ourselves participating in. Faith communities have the spiritual ancestral technology to talk about that evil very publicly. But I would encourage that, like you're saying, this is an intersectional moment where faith, public sector, private sector can start speaking in a unified way about the evil that we're confronting in this country that's kind of rotting the soul of the nation, and how we're ready to call that evil out, even when we may have to call ourselves out. And I think if we adopt that type of framing with your leadership in terms of what you've already experienced and bringing that to the governor, I think we become that much stronger in anticipation for what Reverend Beth, as we know, they are coming back to Illinois, and they may come back in the forces that we've seen in Minneapolis. So we need to really collectively prepare for a new type of confrontation with this evil.
Yes.
Thank you so much, Deputy Governor, for your comments and highlighting what the state of Illinois is doing in that. I'm wondering what preemptive strategies you guys are talking about or thinking about in anticipation of the return. Are you doing anything preemptively legally to keep them out? Or what's the preemptive strategy?
Well, so I think we're going to double down in working in partnership with community providers and faith leaders and organizations. We're going to be having a planning session to determine, to do a little reflection. I think we facilitated, I think, a really strong response with the hub and the hotline, as I shared with you. And thank goodness we had such a robust community infrastructure, as well as legal community who came together. I think that one of the things that I think all of us are thinking about is what does the scale look like? How do you scale up what has already existed and what do we need to do differently? And so I think the main thing that we're going to do is really examine what has happened, um, uh, do more of what worked and do less of what didn't, and do that planning with community.
So, I guess I have the final question and we'll wrap up, unless the Queen Mother has, final closing remarks. Um, I would like to, this is gonna be weird, but I want to hear from Grace, the person Grace who had the lens of working from government. How are you feeling about the collapse of our government in this moment?
I'll say that I can't let myself feel too much, or I don't know how I would be able to get up out of bed every morning. And so I sometimes I can't look at the news every day. I just can't. And when I don't, I feel irresponsible because I should be informed as to what is happening. But I can't stomach the rhetoric and the lies, right, on a daily basis. So I'm trying not to let sink into my soul too much how devastating and how scary everything is. And I think what I am so thankful for is that I have a job that enables me to fight back and to do something about what is happening in our country and what our state. So most of the time, I feel energized and I feel proud because I know that we're doing everything that we can. We literally ask ourselves every single day in the office, what more can we do, honestly? And so, you know, having worked in the immigrant and refugee community since my early 20s, I'm also very thankful that I grew up in this community, and that people know me, that I know them, and so that we can have hard conversations faster. Not meaning that we all agree, but that we can have that conversation. This is my home and my place, and I've dedicated my whole career to lifting up immigrant and refugee communities and doing human services. So I mean, part of me feels like everything that we've built is like kind of crumbling, but I know that the bedrock that we built, right, is strong. And where would we be if we together had not built that bedrock already? So most of the time I feel inspired. Sometimes I feel super sad. I really I can't let myself believe what is happening. And so I just had to keep putting one foot in front of the other and be inspired and have ideas from folks like you. And the governor asks us every day, what more can we do? So, you know, we try things like we're trying with the Illinois Department of Human Rights. We created this commission that is, you know, the only one of its kind across the country. We stood up this portal. We're we're MacGyvering it, I would say. So, but I appreciate you asking. It's hard, but thankfully I can put my energy into trying to make things better.
Thank you.
Thank you.
To all who have been here, in this moment of silence, I think we can feel and hear the call of the ancestors who are telling us we cannot be silenced because silence puts us on the side of the oppressor. We will not be silent. And so as we come to a close, this is a new beginning of new partnerships, of new commitments, of new accountabilities, of new covenants that represent the moral agency of this community that can center itself to be a part of the moral agency for the transformation of the world. I do believe that because the ancestors are calling us to ourselves. And so I think what we have begun and re-begun is to name the evil and to name the demon. I think we must surround ourselves with kindred spirits, and this is evidence of that. And there's a peace that we feel because we have dared to do that. We've talked a lot this week about Martin Luther King and the vision for the beloved community. Let us, in the spirit of Ubuntu, keep our eyes on that prize. And at the end of the day, wake up every morning with gratitude for having one more day to serve, but also to have the capacity, the temerity, the fearlessness to ask the question, how do we not become the evil that we are trying to defeat? With that, from our various traditions and positions, collectively, we rise in the spirit of Ubuntu and Sawubona. We see one another. We are one another. We will continue to stand with one another and let the circle not be unbroken. Amen and Ashe.
Thank you. Thank you. Thanks, Tony. Oh, thank you.
God bless you.
Uh-huh.
Thanks, you both.
Thank you. Okay. Thank you. Yep, I'm good.
I'm Martha. I work with my information dress is beautiful. There's things that I can do. Okay. I work with U of I Extension, doing civic engagement, public policy, presidents of colleges.